The silent forest. The forest had no wind, no birds, no sound. Even the bugs avoided this part of the world. It was too quiet to be natural, too still to be safe. Eli Ward stood at the center of that silence. He wore a thick coat patched with armor and dirt, his boots pressed down on cold, dead soil that hadn't seen life in years. In his hand, he held a black spike, long and sharp, humming with power. He bent down and drove it into the earth. A low vibration ran through the ground like a warning. He looked around with sharp eyes, scanning the treetops. He knew they watched from above, even if they never showed themselves. Eli wasn't a hunter. Not anymore. He used to be a soldier, an engineer, a defender of Earth. But when the aliens came, they took more than cities and skies. They took people quietly, secretly, and without mercy. Now he lived alone in the ruins of a forgotten town. But he hadn't gone mad like others thought. No, Eli had a plan, a purpose, and tonight it was almost ready. The trap was his masterpiece. Dozens of black spikes buried in perfect formation, each one linked by underground circuits, motion sensors, and plasma triggers. If an alien touched just one, the entire field would close like jaws. He returned to his bunker, a concrete shell. Buried beneath an old service station, screens lit up the dark interior, showing every angle of the forest. A soft beep told him the trap was armed, and just in time. Because something had entered the outer perimeter, Eli narrowed his eyes at the screen. One camera flickered, then showed movement, a flash of glowing skin. Too fast to be a normal animal. Too soft to be a machine. He adjusted the view, switched lenses, increased contrast. Then he saw it clearly. A figure, tall and thin, walked slowly between the trees. Its skin was pale blue, almost silver under the moonlight. It wasn't armored, wasn't cloaked, just walking barefoot toward the center of the trap. Eli froze, his hand on the kill switch. This was it, the moment he had waited for. But something felt wrong. The creature wasn't moving like a soldier or a scout. It limped, holding its side, leaving a faint trail of glowing blood. He waited until it reached the center. A blue ring lit beneath its feet, locking the field. Energy snapped through the air. Bolts of force locked it in place. It dropped to its knees with a faint cry. Weak but alive, Eli grabbed his rifle and rushed to the surface. The cold air bit his face, but he moved fast. At the edge of the trap field, he aimed his weapon at the figure. "Don't move," he said. Though he knew it wouldn't understand, the figure turned slowly. It was not what he expected, not a monster, not a soldier. It was a girl, or something like one. Big violet eyes stared at him, full of pain and fear. Her arms were thin, her feet were cut, and strange marks covered her back. She wore torn silver cloth, more like a prisoner than a fighter. And then she spoke, not words, but soft sounds like singing, almost like crying. Eli lowered the gun just a little, confused. Was this a trick? A new kind of infiltration? Or was she something else entirely? He stepped closer, eyes scanning for weapons. There were none. Just a strange collar around her neck with lights blinking slowly. She looked up and reached toward him, but before she could touch the edge of the trap, it shocked her. She screamed and fell back, trembling. Eli cursed and shut off the trap field. She collapsed into the dirt, unconscious. He stared at her for a long moment before finally slinging his rifle and lifting her. She was lighter then. She looked almost weightless. He carried her to the bunker, locking the hatch behind him. Inside, he placed her on the medical table. Scans showed her body was running hot, very hot, but stable. Her blood had strange particles. Half organic, half synthetic. Not a soldier, not a robot, not even a weapon. She was something else. Something new. Hours passed, and she slept without waking. Eli sat in the corner, rifle by his side, eyes fixed on her. He didn't trust her, but he couldn't kill her either. He had built the perfect trap for aliens, but he had caught something far more dangerous. Not a beast, not a monster, but a mystery in the shape of a girl. The girl who shouldn't exist. The trap was off, but Eli kept the door locked. She hadn't moved since he placed her on the table. She looked peaceful now, almost like a child sleeping after a long walk. But Eli's fingers stayed near the trigger of his rifle, just in case, all night. He watched the girl through the screen. The camera showed no movement in the forest. The trap grid was untouched, but in his bunker, something had already entered something. Not meant to be caught. By sunrise the girl stirred. Her hand twitched. Her lips moved silently. Then her eyes snapped open, bright violet and wide. She sat up quickly, breathing hard like she'd woken from a nightmare. Eli pointed the rifle at her, but she didn't attack. Instead, she looked around, confused, then locked eyes with him. There was no hate in her stare, only fear and recognition, like she had seen humans before, but never one like him. She touched her chest, then the metal table. Then she looked at him again and tried to speak, not in words, but in soft tones. Her voice was smooth, strange, almost like wind passing through glass. Eli didn't respond. He activated the translator device, but it made no sense of her sounds. No match found, it said again and again, frustrated. She leaned forward and drew a symbol on the glass wall with her finger. A spiral, then a line through it. She tapped it twice, then pointed at herself, then at him. Eli didn't understand the meaning, but something about the spiral made his skin crawl. He checked her collar again, still blinking, still powered, some kind of tracker, maybe a control device. He connected it to his interface. The device rejected all access, but not before flashing one word in alien script: prototype. Eli stepped back, thinking, a prototype of what? Soldier? Drone? Spy? Or something worse, something no one had seen before. She suddenly reached out toward the camera above, not to break it, but to stare into it. She tilted her head and whispered softly. Then the camera went black. Eli jumped to another feed. Still working, but his heart pounded harder. She wasn't just a prisoner. She knew how tech worked, his tech, human tech, that made her dangerous. He activated the containment barrier inside the bunker. A red shimmer passed between them, cutting the room in half. Now she was trapped. Awake and aware, she didn't try to run, didn't scream. She sat down slowly and drew more symbols on the floor with her finger. He stared at them through the glass. One looked like a claw, another like a planet cracked in half. The third one looked like a human hand broken and bleeding. Then she looked at him again and pointed at the wall, where the camera had died, outside. The forest shivered, not from wind, but from something deeper. The trap sensors blinked red for a second, then went still again. Eli checked every feed, but saw nothing. Still, he felt the weight of eyes watching. He turned back to the girl. She now sat quietly, her hands resting in her lap. And then, for the first time, she said a word he understood. Run. It wasn't perfect, but it was clear. One word filled with fear. Not threat, one word that didn't belong on her tongue, but she forced it out anyway. Eli didn't move, didn't blink. He felt a cold knot in his chest begin to tighten. Something was coming, something that wanted her back, or wanted her erased. And his trap, the one he had spent years perfecting, might not be enough this time, because he hadn't just caught an alien, he had caught a secret, and secrets always draw monsters. What came after her? The first camera didn't just glitch, it went black like a dying eye. Then another blinked once, then faded. Eli stared at the screen, breath held. A cold whisper crawled up his spine. Something was outside, and it was breaking the rules. The trap grid wasn't tripped, yet the signals were falling, one by one. The forest's eyes went blind. Whatever was out there didn't step on the ground. It moved without weight, without sound, but it was there watching, hunting, learning. Inside the bunker, the girl Ashlyn, he had begun calling her, suddenly stood. She ran to the glass and slammed her palm against it. Her voice broke through, urgent and strange. Shalaran! She cried, over and over, eyes wide with terror. Eli didn't need a translator to understand. Whatever Shalaran was, it scared her badly. She pointed at the wall, then at the ceiling, then at him. She was begging not to be freed, but to warn him. The lights flickered once. Then the power backup kicked in. Eli cursed and grabbed his weapon. He scanned the monitors. Only 3 working feeds remained. One showed the trees bending slowly, though there was no wind. He checked the trap interface. Nothing had been triggered, not one spike activated. But something was walking between them, something that knew where not to step. He turned back toward the girl. She was scribbling fast on the glass wall with a piece of broken wire. A new shape, a circle split into 4 parts. At the center, she drew what looked like an eye crossed out. The warning was clear. Whatever was coming, it didn't want to be seen. A loud hum filled the room, then silence. All outside feeds went dead. Eli's heart pounded as he checked the perimeter scanner. It showed static. Then one word, presence detected. No shape, no signal, no heat signature. Just the warning. Presence detected. Eli activated the emergency lockdown metal. Shutters closed over the outer door. But he knew steel wouldn't matter. This wasn't a regular enemy. The girl looked at him with fear and guilt. She whispered again, Jalaran, then added a second word in broken human voice. Cleaner, Eli. Froze a cleaner. Like a machine meant to wipe things out, he stared at her. Understanding beginning to bloom like dread in his chest. She hadn't just escaped. She had escaped something, and that something was now here. To make sure she never spoke again, suddenly. A deafening knock echoed through the bunker's outer hatch. Not an explosion, not a weapon, just a single, heavy knock, then silence, then another knock, deeper this time. The girl covered her ears and fell to her knees. Her body shook like she was being torn apart from inside. Eli ran to her, reached through the barrier. Tell me what it is. He shouted. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Not alive. Not dead. It finds, then burns. Everything. Outside, the steel door bent inward like it had been touched by fire and ice together. Something was melting it without heat, pressing into the metal without strength. Eli's trap wasn't made for this. He had built it to catch invaders, not things that erased their targets. He rushed to the console, activating his last weapon manual overload. Every spike in the field began to hum, building up unstable charge. He didn't care if it destroyed the forest. If it bought him 30 seconds, it might be enough. But before the pulse could fire, the screen lit up again, this time with a face, a cold mask, black and silver, with no mouth and eyes that shimmered like liquid glass. It looked directly at him, no words, no threat. Just a signal flashed once. Return subject or be erased. Then the signal cut, and the outer door screamed. Asterisk the pact. The steel hatch groaned like it was screaming in pain. Something was eating its way through, not breaking it, but unraveling the metal layer by layer. Eli had seconds, maybe less. He looked back at the girl, still kneeling, arms over her head. And in that moment, he made a choice he never thought he'd make. He shut down the internal barrier. The red shimmer vanished between them. The girl gasped as the field fell, her wide eyes locking onto his. Eli tossed her a weapon, his backup plasma knife. She caught it, confused, unsure if it was another test. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply nodded. And in that shared look, something unspoken passed between them. The pact wasn't made with words. It was born in fear, trust, and desperation. She stood slowly, her hands trembling but her legs firm. For the first time, she wasn't a prisoner, she was his partner. The outer hatch crumpled inward like foil. From the hallway, black mist began to seep through. Not smoke, not gas, it moved like it had purpose, like it could see. Eli raised his weapon. Aiming down the corridor, Ashlyn stepped beside him, her skin pulsing faint blue. She whispered something and placed her hand on the wall. The steel under her fingers lit up with ancient symbols. Lines of energy spread through the bunker walls like veins. Eli watched, stunned, as his systems came alive with symbols he didn't recognize. His trap grid began to shift, rewriting itself, adapting. She was reprogramming the entire defense system by touch alone. Yours, she whispered, pointing at the monitors. Then She pointed at herself. Ours. Eli didn't understand how, but she had bonded with the system, maybe even him. Her kind had built the monsters, maybe even the weapons. But she wasn't one of them anymore outside. The black mist slammed against the final barrier. Sparks flew across the monitors. Alarms screamed. The power grid dropped to red 70%, then 60. Eli loaded the last 2 trap charges, ready to trigger them from the console. The girl stepped forward, hand glowing bright now. She drew one final symbol in the air, a triangle of spirals. The mist paused, like it recognized her signal. Then it screamed not with sound, but with pressure. The walls of the bunker began to crack. Ashlyn fell to her knees, blood trailing from her nose, but she kept her hand raised, feeding power from her own body into the defenses. Eli ran to her side, trying to stop her, but she shook her head and pointed at the control panel. He understood she could hold the creature back, but only if Eli fired the trap while she kept it distracted. "Do it," she whispered, voice weak but sure. Eli hesitated. He had built the perfect trap for aliens, but never meant to sacrifice someone inside it. He looked at her, this strange glowing girl who wasn't quite alien, who wasn't quite human either, but who had chosen him. He slammed the trigger. A blinding pulse of light exploded through the room. Energy tore through the walls, ripping out through the forest like a solar flare. The trap collapsed inward like a dying star, and with it, so did the mist. Then, silence. Only the emergency lights remained, blinking red. The bunker was still intact barely. Eli coughed and looked around. The screens were shattered, systems fried. The trap had worked, but at a cost. He turned toward the center of the room, expecting to see nothing, but she was still there. Ashlyn lay motionless, her body cracked with light like porcelain. He ran to her, lifted her gently. Her eyes fluttered open, faint but alive, and with a weak smile she said one word, "Together." Beneath the ground didn't stop shaking, even after the trap fired, even after the mist vanished. The earth below the bunker still pulsed like something alive was waking up. Eli pressed his hand to the cold metal floor. It was vibrating, not from outside, but from deep beneath them. Ashlyn lay weak in his arms, her glowing skin now flickering. Her eyes opened slowly, and she reached out, not toward him, but toward the floor beneath them. She whispered one word, barely heard, "Door." Eli frowned, confused. Door to what? He asked, but she was already slipping into sleep. He laid her gently on the medical table and checked her vitals, stable but fading. Her energy was tied to something under the bunker, and that something had awakened. Eli activated the ground scan. The screen lit up with something impossible. Below them was not just dirt and rock. A structure was hidden underground, massive, ancient, and still powered. He grabbed his gear and followed the signals. Behind a wall in the lowest part of the bunker, he found it. A panel of alien metal, smooth and seamless. But when he touched it, it opened like it had been waiting for him. Beyond the wall, a staircase spiraled down into darkness, not carved, not built. It was grown. The walls pulsed softly with blue veins of light. As he descended, the temperature dropped and the air thickened. He reached a wide chamber, circular and silent. At the center stood a pillar covered in symbols. Some he recognized from what Ashlyn had drawn. Others felt older, angrier, forgotten. A console rose from the ground as he approached. No buttons, no screens, just smooth light under his hand. When he touched it, the lights in the room surged. A voice echoed in his head, not from outside, but inside his mind. Biosignature accepted. Human operator Eli Ward. He stepped back, shocked. The structure had recognized him. Why? Then he saw it above the console, a stasis chamber. Inside floated another being, similar to Ashlyn, but different. Taller, armored, silent. The chamber cracked open slowly. Mist poured out, and the being stepped onto the floor. Its eyes opened, not violet, but white like lightning, and it spoke a word Eli had only heard once before. Jalaran. This wasn't another prisoner. This was a weapon, one that had been sleeping until now. Eli raised his rifle, but the being didn't attack. It looked past him toward the ceiling, toward Ashlyn. Then it turned and walked toward a dark corridor behind the console. Lights came on as it moved, revealing walls lined with stasis pods. Some were empty, some cracked, others still sealed. This wasn't just a base, it was a factory. And Ashlyn was the first to escape. Eli activated his com link. "Ashlyn, are you awake? There's something under the bunker." Another one. Bigger. No reply, only static. He turned back to the console and saw a map. It showed more chambers, deeper ones, and a core at the very bottom. A pulsing red mark blinked from that core. Danger, power, warning. Then something moved on the Fangwa. Map, a signal, massive and fast, coming from above, descending from orbit. The screen displayed a word in both alien and human script. Reclaimer en route. Eli's heart dropped. The last one nearly tore his bunker apart. This new one was heading straight for the underground facility. Not to capture Ashlyn, but to erase everything. He turned and ran back up the stairs, every step heavier than the last. Ashlyn needed to wake. They had to leave or fight, because what slept beneath the ground was no longer resting. And something far worse was about to arrive from the sky. Asterisk, the Predator War begins. The sky above the forest cracked open, like thunder without sound. Clouds split in perfect lines, and something enormous pushed through the atmosphere. Eli didn't need sensors to tell him it wasn't a ship, it was a weapon. The Reclaimer had arrived, and it didn't care who was human, alien or innocent. In the bunker, alarms were dead, lights flickered. The only glow came from Ashlyn's body, still lying on the table. She breathed shallow, her skin dimmer now. Like a dying ember, Eli knelt beside her, gripping her hand tightly. "Wake up," he whispered. "I need you, now more than ever." A distant rumble shook the walls. The underground structure had begun to respond. Not with defense, but with submission. The factory recognized the Reclaimer's signal. Doors below were unlocking, weapons powering up, but not for Eli. They were opening to allow the Reclaimer in. Eli stood fast and grabbed the modified detonator. The trap network had rebooted, running half on alien tech and half on his designs. He had one chance to lure the Reclaimer into the grid, but it would only work if Ashlyn woke and guided him again. Suddenly, her hand squeezed his fingers. She opened her eyes, weak but aware. "I saw it," she whispered. "It knows we're linked. What do we do?" Eli asked. She pointed to the trap system, and then to her chest. "I must connect directly," she said. "I can power the field, shape it. You'll die," he said, voice low. She smiled sadly. "Then I'll take it with me." Eli shook his head. There has to be another way. But outside, the sky grew darker. The Reclaimer descended through fire, its body a mass of black tendrils and silver plates. It walked on no legs, just floated down like a god of destruction. Eli and Ashlyn moved fast. They climbed the surface tower. Where the first trap node still stood, she placed her hand on the core, her light pulsing brighter than before. The trap grid lit across the forest in a perfect circle. The ground hummed, trees bent, the air crackled. Then the Reclaimer arrived. Its voice wasn't a sound, it was pressure. A weight that made Eli fall to one knee. It scanned the field once, and then began to burn it. Not with fire, but with gravity itself. Ashlyn screamed and poured more of her energy into the field. It pushed back, twisted space around the Reclaimer. The machine paused for the first time, surprised. Then it attacked. Beams of dark light shot from its core, tearing through trap nodes like paper. But Eli was ready. He had hidden a second field deeper, stronger, buried beneath the main one, and when the Reclaimer stepped forward to strike Ashlyn, Eli triggered the final phase. The earth erupted, a cage of plasma locking around the creature. The Reclaimer writhed, its form bending, glitching, flickering. For the first time it felt pain. Ashlyn cried out, collapsing to her knees. Her veins glowed like fire, and her voice echoed in the air, not words, but force. She became the trap, her body the circuit, her soul the signal. The reclaimer reached for her, but it was too late. Eli watched, helpless. As the light engulfed them both, the reclaimer twisted in rage, shrinking into a single point of burning gravity. Then silence, smoke rose from the trees, the trap grid. Gone, the ground scarred, in the middle of the crater. Eli stood alone. The field was empty. She was gone, or so he thought. A faint pulse of light blinked in the air. He followed it one step at a time. At the very center, a single mark had been burned into the stone, a spiral with a line through. It her sign. The war had begun and ended in the same breath. But the galaxy would never be the same again. What the trap left behind the forest was quiet again. But it wasn't peace, it was aftermath. Trees had fallen in every direction, twisted like they had grown in pain. The trap grid was gone, melted into the dirt, and the sky above no longer held clouds, just scars of fire in the upper atmosphere. Eli stood at the edge of the crater. His rifle was gone, his armor cracked, his hands burned, but his eyes stayed on the center, where Ashlyn had made her final stand, where the reclaimer had vanished in a burst of collapsing gravity. Nothing moved, no machines rose from the ashes, no voice whispered from the ruins. The reclaimer was truly gone, and with it, so was she. He walked into the crater, one slow step at a time. The soil beneath his boots pulsed once just faintly, like the earth remembered her. Then he saw it etched into the stone, still glowing, a spiral crossed with a single line. Her final message, not a warning, a signature. He knelt and touched it. The light passed through his fingers and into his skin. In that moment, memories not his own flashed through his mind. Running from labs, fighting through shadows, speaking to stars, all hers. She had given him a piece of herself, so he would remember, so he would understand. The trap hadn't just captured something dangerous. It had connected two lives across different worlds. And now he carried both. Eli returned to the bunker. The systems were dead, but the underground structure still breathed. Not with weapons, but with silence. He sealed the base, locked the access point, and marked it with a new symbol, two spirals. Side by side, joined by a single line. Weeks passed, then months. Rumors began to spread, of a human who vanished into the wild zones, of alien weapons going dark, of lab facilities failing without reason, of someone who broke into them, not to destroy, but to free, a man with strange eyes and quiet steps. A man who left no footprints but always carved the same mark into steel, a spiral with a single line. No one knew his name, no one ever caught him. But those who saw him swear he was never alone. A faint light always walked beside him, and sometimes, if you stood very still, you could hear her voice. Not with words, but with warmth. The perfect trap had worked, but what it captured changed everything. Not a weapon, not a monster, but a reason to fight for more than survival, a reason to believe.